In example 2, we're going to graph y equals 1/2 times the sine of x. Notice here that the amplitude is 1/2, which means we should be shrinking or compressing our graph vertically. The points that we're going to pick for our x, always that we want to take the sine of, are those 5 key points that we used in the last example. So that's 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Now as we work through the notes and things start changing, the one thing that you're going to have to really understand is how we're creating these tables. So I'll explain that as we go through it, but eventually you're going to have to create your own tables and fill them out along with the graphing. These are the 5 key points we're always going to use that we want to take the sine, the cosine of. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to evaluate these 5 key points. So what is the sine of 0? Well, the sine of 0 is just 0. And then we want to know what is the sine of pi over 2. The sine of pi over 2 is 1. What's the sine of pi? The sine of pi is 0. What's the sine of 3 pi over 2? That's -1. And the sine of 2 pi is 0. And we talked about that on the front page. You don't necessarily have to memorize these. You need to know these 5 key points, but it's just working your way along the axes. And then again, you don't have to memorize this. You could figure it out each time if you want, but the more you do it, the more you'll probably remember what they are. Then what we want to look at is what our actual function is here. And what we're doing is we're taking 1/2 times the sine of x. So we're taking this sine of x number and we're multiplying it by 1/2. So in this last part here, we want to multiply the y value by 1/2. So what we're doing is we're taking 1/2 times 0, which is still 0. Then we're going to take 1/2 times 1, which is 1/2. And then we're going to take 1/2 times 0 again, which is 0. 1/2 times -1 is -1/2. And then finally 1/2 times 0 one more time, which is still 0. Our ordered pairs that we are going to be using are going to come from this x value and this y value. So in our ordered pair, this is the x and this is the y. So let's set up our axes the way that we need it to look. So if we have 0, we have pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. We are going between 1/2 and -1, so I'm going to use this as +1 and -1, and so this marking here and here is +1/2 and -1/2, directly halfway between. And then I'm going to plot my points. I have the point 0, 0. I have the point pi over 2, 1/2, pi 0, 3 pi over 2, -1/2, and 2 pi 0. And then I'm going to draw in my nice curved sine graph. If you have questions, let me know.